Okay. I call the finance meeting to order. Clerk, please read the roll call.
Decent?
No.
Gal?
Here.
No, Decent is not here.
No.
Oh, yeah. I think they're both Dave. I think that's why it messed with me.
Yeah.
Okay, Decent, no. Gal, yes. And then Hartinger?
Here.
Okay. Jumland?
Here.
Wyland?
Here.
All right.
Next on the agenda is approval of minutes for a previous meeting, April 18th, 2022.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Motion's been approved. Any more in discussion? No. Okay, no remarks, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Item, oh, do we have any public comments?
Is there anyone in Zoom?
Just us.
Okay, so good. No one.
Item number 5, the April budget status report.
Okay, attached in your packet, you'll see the April budget status report. We have the narrative. Is there any questions with that? You're not? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you wanting to do this? That one?
No.
I'll move to acknowledge the April 2022 budget status report for all funds.
Motion by Gal, second by Jim.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
I apologize, I did miss the second. Perfect, thank you. Okay.
The other Dave.
Okay, item number 6, TIP 1 and TIP 2 detail report for April.
Is there any questions on that? So this is in the packet because in the past we've had members request more information on our TIF. So one of the things we decided to do is print out the detail of TIF. So TIF is made up of 3 funds for TIF 1. So TIF 1 has the special revenue fund, the capital projects fund, and then it has the CDA. So the CDA is only used to pay for the debt of the CDA revenue bonds. The capital projects TIF keeps track of major capital projects. Currently within TIF 1, we have Weston Avenue going on. And then the special revenue keeps track of mostly the administration in there. So when you're looking through it, you'll see lots of payroll. But if you get through it, there is actual expenditures besides payroll, and it's only a month's worth. So if you have any questions or need more information ever, just let us know.
I have a few questions on it.
Okay.
I went through it and I was one of the things I'm looking for is, and the question always comes up is how much staff is in the payroll of TIF district? And I think when we do the budgeting process, I don't know if people realize how much staff time is actually allocated to the TIFs.
Okay.
Now, when I worked in the communities, it'd be nice to know the percentages of each person's position that's allocated to a TIF district.
Okay.
I noticed in some of you are, most of you are allocated to both of them and some may not to all of them for individuals, if I see that correct.
Yes.
And then the other thing I noticed is you have certain legal fees that come out of the TIF too. Those have to be associated with the TIF district. So
Yes.
okay. And what's the next one I had in here?
So do you want just a summary of the percentages of everyone that is in the TIF? Do you want that to reappear monthly, like at the?
No, I mean, when I've worked in when I've been administrating for other communities, a lot of times the question comes up is, how much does a TIF district support the staff?
We usually talk about it more around the budget time, because that's when we talk about the wage allocations. But if you want it with the TIF detail, I can definitely bring that up.
No, I'm not, I don't need that detail. I'm just looking at, okay, Michael, for example, has X amount of percentage going to TIF X and TIF Y. And then when we come to the budget period, everybody understands who is associated to TIF.
Okay.
And the reason I bring it up, because when it comes to discussion all the time, we're closing TIFs. And the closing TIFs, I don't think people realize how much is being, of the staff's time being allocated to TIF districts. And when you do close a TIF out down, and of course you close it down, you get that, you get the revenue portion, but at the same time, those folks come back on your general tax roll. And I think that's important that we all understand that. And that's why I'm bringing that up.
Okay.
And then I see that there's a legal piece here, which I know is associated TIF, but I also saw like, some projects that are done on the planning stage. Are those ongoing or are those just monthly fees, or we have a certain contract for those?
The engineering, like AECom?
Yeah, AECom, and then there's also a planning one I saw.
They want Weston Avenue?
That's all Weston Avenue, right?
I don't know, but the planning.
Yeah, I couldn't figure that was, when I was the planning commissioner, I remember that. But basically, these are monthly fees, but then we will, when you take a look at the balance at the bottom end, you're talking the balance basically for that month, correct? On the right-hand side? Scrolling through it.
The balance,
Yes, so the 4/30/22 is just looking at payroll. So the way on the right, that's, you'll see what period that month is
Yep,
for, so
I saw that.
4/30, yeah. And then there's the year-to-date budget, year-to-date down there too.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at,
I'll go to the last page is when I'm looking at it, it has a grand total. And I want to know if that's consistent with all the TIFs or is that just certain one TIF? There you go.
I believe that's just doing the fund.
Itself, the total fund of all of the TIF, right?
I think that's doing Fund 40.
Which
That's,
is,
40 is capital projects for TIF.
okay, that's just a 40, Fund 40, okay. So, okay. All right, I thank you for educating me a little bit. Because these accounts are different than I've seen in the past.
Jessica, when you allocate during the budget process, the amount of time that employees are gonna spend on TIF, that's a kind of a floating thing. It's not
so we're able to,
guesstimated, but it's
We do a
based on the
percentage.
things that actually go on or things that come up during the year.
we do a percentage and the thought is in the life of the TIF, things just even out. We haven't updated our percentages. I think they're updated while I was away. So maybe 2015, 16, I think the percentages were changed a little bit, but
It's kind of based on what staff's allocated to TIF districts.
Right, it's a
the guesstimate.
estimate.
It's the best guess, I know.
Try to massage it, or I guess, track it to the minute or whatever, every, I guess as compared to trying to do that, it's probably more sensible to do it that way.
Possible. I know how it works. I just want to make sure everybody, I'm aware of it, but I don't know if some of the other.
Yep.
Where it was basically when you put the budget together. I'm more concerned when people are so concerned of closing TIFs down. And then when they close TIFs down, I don't know if they have real cognizant amount how much money comes to staff on a TIF district.
When we talked about closing TIF 2 not that long ago, we did
I know I wasn't here.
inform them that only about $6,000 of the whole TIF closure would actually increase our spending ability, because the rest was eaten up with admin fees.
Say again?
Only if we were to have closed TIF 2,
Yep.
only about $6,000 would have come back to the general fund for free spending, I'll say, because the rest of it was eaten up with administration fees, our wages and stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Jessica, we have administration fees in TIF 1 and TIF 2,
Yes,
and that's something that, I guess, how is that done? Is that done? How do you know how much time they spend in a month, I guess, or on it?
it was just an estimate from the beginning.
For the beginning?
It was re-looked at, as I said, back, I think 15 or 16. When I came back, the percentages were changed a little bit. And I think they were changed by the previous administrator. He might have looked at the way people are spending their time, so.
So TIF 1 and TIF 2 are essentially subsidizing our payroll, is
Not
that
much.
correct? We're taking money out of those districts to help pay the employees.
Yes,
So if we close them, then we have more that we have to pay for out of the village.
yes, but then we get more money back to be able to pay those.
When you close the TIFs, you'll be able to, everybody gets more back at the schools, MATC, all of us. So when she's saying this, when you close them, it's still covering the cost, you still get a net revenue of $6,000.
Okay. And TIF 1 is operating at a revenue of what annually?
So the increment, I'm not sure exactly the question, the TIF increment for this year is $6 million.
Is that 1 and 2 or just 1?
That's just TIF.
Okay.
TIF 2, is it? I'm trying to think offhand. I think that's 250 or 3. Actually, it's more now. Maybe 5. Remember?
What?
TIF 2?
So TIF 2 has total revenues of around 600,000. And then TIF 1 has total revenue, this is for 2021, as of December 31st. TIF 1 has about 8.5 million.
You have to remember, last year, 2021, we got 2 million back from our ETC project, so
Yeah,
that's
so
why it's so
the
high.
increment, which is what we get from the taxes, is about 5.9 million.
But then you got your expenditures against that too.
Yeah, TIF 1 has about $250,000 in administrative.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
This right there, a motion to acknowledge?
Mhm.
Okay. Motion to.
A motion to acknowledge TIF 1 and 2 detail reports for April.
Motion by Hardinger,
I'll second it.
second by Gow.
Another question?
Yeah, next page. What?
No, you're supposed to say on a question, then they.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
Excuse me, any more in discussion? No remarks, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passed. 7, Government and County 101 presentation.
Okay. I will share my screen. I'm gonna stand up so people can hear me.
Michael, that one's in my folder.
Yeah, Jessica's gonna
I'll share my screen.
share her screen.
Ah.
That way I'm not trying to click.
Oh, there. There.
Which one should look at?
Okay, so first I want to do a quick introduction. I'm Jessica Trotwood, Finance Director at the Village. I have been doing governmental accounting since 2001. I was an auditor from 2001 to 2007, and I audited solely government. So then got a lot of background there. I really dug into the details. And then in 2007, I came to the Village of Weston. And I left the village in 2015, went to Red Mountain for a couple of years as a finance director there. And then I came back as a finance director here. When I was originally hired at the village, I was just the deputy. But when I came back in 2017, I took the finance director position. So, and there's Jenna. This is Jenna's last day, but she can tell you her background.
So I've been with the village since 2016. Started as the finance specialist, paying the bills and doing receivables. And then with some changes in staffs, I got promoted to the deputy. And I've been doing that since 2017. You have lots of detail. I'm not exciting. I am moving to Minnesota. So I will be done as of the end of this month. But
Congratulations.
thanks.
So if you have any questions, make sure you ask. This is gonna be a quick presentation. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I like throwing out terms because I've been using the terminology, the jargon for quite a few years now, but if you ever want me to slow down or explain things, just let me know. So outline for this quick presentation, an introduction to government accounting, state requirements, and current state of village finances. This presentation was done like a year ago, so the current state is where we were a year ago. So governmental accounting. Governmental accounting is overseen by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. It's called GASB. This year, for 2022, we have a new GASB pronouncement, GASB 87, and we'll be cursing GASB 87 year end. We have to account for our leases a little bit different than we've always accounted for them. In the past, they're either treated like debt or they're treated in our regular operations. At the end of this year, we need to treat all our leases as if we received a benefit from this asset, and we have they're treated a little bit differently. It'll be different. So with governmental accounting, we use fund accounting. There are three main types of funds: governmental, proprietary, fiduciary. Governmental funds is the main fund that we usually care about most. The general, special revenue, debt service, capital projects, and permanent. Governmental funds use the modified accruing basis of accounting, meaning that, like for example, our municipal courts receivable, we have a large receivable for municipal court fines. So say it's $200,000, but you're not going to find that on the revenue side as you would for normal business. We get to recognize, which is record revenue for a part of that receivable, but the other part of that receivable ends up on the balance sheet as in the liability section. It's called the deferred inflow of resources section. It's because we can't recognize that revenue yet because we haven't earned it. So that's a little bit different. So the general fund is the chief operating fund of the government. Special revenues account for specific revenue sources and uses. Special revenue funds cannot have a majority of its revenue coming from the tax levy. So things that are special revenue are refuse recycling, which the majority of it comes from special charges on the tax roll. So we do collect the majority on the tax roll, but it's considered a special charge, not the general tax levy. And then the other special revenue funds are pool and the TIF. And we have our special grant fund now that we're keeping track of ARPA. That's the special revenue. Next fund is the debt service fund. It accounts for the resources and payments related to long-term debt, principal and interest. So it came up in the paper not that long ago that WASA had their debt service fund in their budget. And they did not have their water debt on there. So the debt service fund and governmental funds does not include utility debt. It only includes the debt from your governmental funds. So if our TIF has a large general obligation debt issue, our TIF has our redevelopment bond, CDA bond issues, and then we have our GO issues. All of that is kept track of in our debt service fund with our principal and interest payments. The debt service fund collects the levy to pay for your general obligation debt that is not funded by any other source.
Okay, because the utilities are not there, because you're going to utilities a priority fund, right?
Yes, utilities are proprietary funds.
Or enterprise,
Yeah.
like a business.
So proprietary fund, there's a proprietary fund, and that's broken into two funds, your enterprise and your internal service fund.
Okay.
So debt service fund, the next one is our capital projects fund. Don't confuse capital projects fund with our CIP program. So we like to talk both. One time we're going to talk about our CIP. Next time I'm going to talk about the capital projects fund. The difference between these two things is our CIP program encompasses all our long-term planning of all our assets that include water, sewer, storm, streets, equipment. Our capital projects fund does not include any of the utility stuff. So we're not gonna be, I'm talking about our lift stations or our wells in our capital projects fund. We're gonna be talking about that in our CIP program, capital improvement program. So, if you ever have questions, don't forget to ask. Fund accounting. Each fund has its own self-balancing set of accounts. So, an example is paying the interest of debt that was allocated to 3 different funds: general fund, sewer, and water. That's gonna require 6 entries on our books. The general fund, it's a credit of cash going out the door, and then you're gonna debit the interest. And then sewer utility, you'll credit the cash, and then you'll credit the interest. And same with storm, credit the cash, but that is 6 entries. To transfer money between funds, when the TIF pays for debt, as I said before, the TIF debt is accounted for in our debt service fund. But I'm not levying general levy taxes to pay that debt. So somehow debt service fund has to get the money from the TIF, and that is done through a transfer. So if you look at our financial statements, kind of on the bottom and other financing sources, you're gonna see transfer ins and transfer outs. And this is the way that our funds give money to one another. So when their TIF has debt to pay, it's gonna transfer it to the debt service. So it's an entry of crediting in cash, debiting the transfer out, and crediting cash and TIF. And then on the other side is the debt service is gonna debit the cash and credit the transfer in. And then when the debt is paid, the debt service fund credits the cash and debits the principal payment or interest payment. So that's also a 6 entry, my computer died. You can't think of it. Sorry, I need a longer battery life. So the reason I'm going through this, I don't want to confuse you, but I want to let you know that when you see our books, there's a lot of entries. Like you'll see the transfer out, transfer in, principal payment, and then that's what the cash actually goes to the person who earns that interest on our bond or our GO notes. Okay, down, down, down.
Oh, I went too far.
Okay, and
So,
stop. Up.
back one?
Okay, done. Okay, we're switching gears. Our next one, we're going to talk about the proprietary funds. So the proprietary funds include our enterprise and our internal service funds. Next page. They're accounted for on the accrual basis of accounting. The enterprise funds account for activities where a fee is charged to external users for goods or services, and that is our stormwater, our water utility, and our sewer utility. The accounting for our enterprise funds is very similar to our regular for business, private business. So, the internal service fund accounts for goods or services provided on a cost reimbursement basis across departments. We use our internal service fund for our self-funded dental insurance.
Oh, we use it for what again?
A self-funded dental insurance.
Okay.
So the village is self-funded for dental. We pay Delta Dental to administer it, but we collect the premiums from Safer, Everest Metro, and village employees. So we take all those premiums, we put it in our bank account in this internal service fund, and then when Delta Dental has claims, or you submit a claim to Delta Dental, they'll send us a bill and we pay it out of that fund. Our internal service fund has been doing really well. This past winter, we actually reduced the premium collected from employees because the balance in our internal service fund was getting too high, meaning we've been overcharging our employees for dental because that balance has been growing. So we do work with Corey at Spectrum, and she kind of helped us adjust our rate to hopefully eat up some of that fund balance. because we shouldn't be holding so much funds.
In other words, you're self-funded.
But,
You're self-funded for that.
yes,
Okay.
next page. Okay, state requirements and regulations. Finance Department is responsible for many state reports. A lot of the reports determine the amount of revenue that we will receive from the state in the form of state aid. There's a state calendar out on the website with all the deadlines. So there's a TIF annual report, room tax report, the sales tax report, the Form C. So the Forms Municipal Financial Report, MFR, Form C, that's one of the more important ones where it's actually due today. Jen's gonna work on it after this. And with that report, that's how they determine our expenditure amount for our general transportation aid. So when you fill out that report, you need to know which accounts are very important. It was just a year or two ago, we filed it and we realized that we had a project that we put in our TIF that we failed to code properly in the correct account. Like we coded it to a 5600 account instead of instead of a 53. So what happened there was we failed to account for about $200,000 of expenditures for streets. Now that was, we refiled, we realized what we did and we refiled it because that was very important to make sure that it was correct, to get the correct expenditures for street outlay so they could calculate our GTA, general transportation aids, properly. So the higher the amount of expenditures that you claim on your Form C that are related to streets, the more aid you can get for streets. Obviously, you have to spend it and it has to be properly classified, but to make sure you know your expenditures well enough to make sure that it gets in that right account is pretty important when you're doing your Form C.
Question for you.
Yes,
There's other departments, operations that can go in that report also, right? Like
Yes.
police costs.
there are different, there is a formula that I've seen before that it points what lines on that Form C the state takes into consideration. Yeah. Expenditure restraint, levy limit worksheet, that's a very important worksheet that we fill out budget time, because we're allowed to only raise our levy, net new construction. Okay, that's about it. Waiting on state information, we kind of talked about this before. During budget time is of the essence, but sometimes we can only move as fast. Like, I can't start my budget work right now and have you the tax rate by in the next couple of months. We rely on the state for a ton of information, and the deadlines are August 16th. We get the personal property aid estimate. That means how much aid are we gonna get for personal property aid? Certificates of equalized value, that is a number that we need, not just for school, college, but we need that for our TIF district to get the amount of increment that we can collect for the TIF, because the TIF relies on equalized value. Shared revenue, that dollar amount hasn't changed for a long time, but maybe some year it will. That's one of our largest state aids is the shared revenue line. And then the November 1st, we get the amount for our expenditure restraint program. Expenditure restraint program, the village has qualified for maybe like 3 years now. We get approximately $80,000. And we get that if we increase our expenditures only a certain percentage, which is the amount that the DOR allows us to, which they notify us November 1st, how much our expenditure budget can increase from one year to the next. So that's a very important program that we try to keep, because if we lose it, we have to come up with $80,000 that you can't really find it anywhere else. So you don't really want to lose that. Next. Levy limits imposed by Wisconsin. A municipality may increase its levy over a prior year's levy by the percentage increase in equalized value from net new construction in the preceding year. Net new construction includes new construction in prior year less any demo, destruction, or correction in the prior year. If there was no net new construction, then the allowable increase in your levy would be 0. I was talking to Keith the other day, we try to put it in perspective. So to get a 1% of net new construction, we need a $14 million project. I just did a what if spreadsheet today. If we get a 1% net new construction, we can increase our operations levy $53,000. To get 12 million of net new construction, that's a lot of net new construction. So when you hear someone say, "Oh, I'm bringing in $2 million," I deserve the village to give me something because I'm bringing in a $2 million project. Well, the village can't even raise that much money. You think of, okay, a 14 million is 1%. What does $2 million get you? That's 0.01%. I mean, it's not a lot of extra revenue that the village is going to get if you're bringing in a $2 million project. So when we're talking about projects, take that into thought of what does 2 million, and what we really need is like a $14 million project. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind when you're talking about net new construction and the ability to increase the village's operations levy.
So what are our percentages we've had last year?
So we haven't had 1% for a while.
I think it was 0.8 last year.
It was 0.8 last year. I think the year before might have been 1, but I know we haven't had a 2 for a while.
We look at the average, I thought we looked at kind of an average, but it varies every year.
It varies every year.
Actually, my goal goes to the next
Go to the next
thing.
page.
Sorry.
That's okay, there it is.
Oh, 2021's not on there. So we were at 1.4.
In project, you're talking about net revenue, you're talking about the tax increase, you mean? Projects itself cost, what you're talking about?
Assessed value of improvements when.
That's what I thought.
Overall, yeah.
Assessed value improvement, so no matter what it is, it's a business, house.
Right.
So it's just something to be aware of as we have conversations with developers, like at Plan Commission or wherever,
Yeah.
you know, and they want to sell the project on the extra increment or whatever it's going to bring in, and, you know, it doesn't have as significant of an increment unless we have a lot of it,
I
right?
want to make those statements at the Plan Commission.
Pardon?
But I wanted to understand is that it's based on your actual growth of all industry, all product, whether it's housing, residential, commercial, industrial. So what was again, I can't quite see that.
Well, 2020 was 1.19, 2019 was 0.86, 2018 was 0.6, 1.4 in 20.
Yeah, so as the economy goes down, that can go down.
And each year that our value increases, it's just harder and harder to get that 1%.
I know. Okay.
Okay, next. Can you go back up? I think I want to talk about. Okay, so the village is allowed a debt adjustment to increase the levy for general obligation, principal, and interest. This is a key factor that I think a lot of people really need to understand when you're in the positions you are, because someone's going to come up to you. How can the village afford to build a $15 million building and we can't add another police officer? I'm going to tell you because the state allows me to do it because I can levy for the debt that I borrow to build the building, but I cannot levy. It wouldn't be wise to levy for that additional police officer. Unless, of course, we talk about a referendum the other day. If we can work through a referendum and the residents agree to a levy increase for certain things, we can raise our levy to pay for whatever we want. That would be just like our general. But for debt, the state allows us to raise our levy to pay for it. So I think that's just really important. Don't always want to blame the state, but we can blame the state. Well, the state allows us to do that, so,
When you talk about a referendum,
yes.
I think we're at last meeting, we talked about a study being made, so we may have a referendum in the future coming up.
Yes, there's talk about having it, for public safety, specifically for, Everest Metro.
Thank you.
There are other adjustments that can be taken. Last year, we took the adjustment of the joint fire. We put, I think it was around $70,000 out of that line. We were able to increase our levy for, safer. There is no line available for Everest Metro. It'd be nice if we could lobby our state representatives and maybe get that line available for us. It would be super helpful to avoid a referendum because like for a safer, we're able to increase the amount of our levy when they increase their needs. Without a referendum, without asking for permission from our taxpayers to bring on the extra money. So, my voice is going. This is just an example of our levy limit worksheet from 2020. Last year was the last year we took our debt adjustment. So this that's just a sample of what the levy limit calculation looks like. Okay, next page.
Do you want me to take over talking?
Sure.
Give your voice a break.
Take a drink.
So the page that you see there is what gets published in the paper at budget time. And this is basically breaking out, okay, here's, what the tax rate's going to be. Here's what the budgets in these funds are going to be. And then that first line for the operating levy. So that's what's being levied for taxes. So that 6.5 million was I think this is 2021's, that was what was levied for operations and debt. And then the line underneath that is the TID levy, which is the 6.3 million. So you'll see this come budget time for basically where all of the taxes are going. And that'll be published in the paper for the public. Yeah, you can go to the next one. 9. So this presentation was done, previously we had a gap in our debt service levy where what we were putting in that line was not exactly what was being paid for debt. So we were kind of covering that with the operations levy, but we have since, I think that's gone completely now, correct? Yeah. So now going forward, this slide doesn't necessarily apply.
But if anyone ever asks you, well, why was the village able to increase it so much in the past? Well, we had this flexibility here that we used it all up. And I think a lot of municipalities, that's what they're using. When you see other municipalities increasing their levy more than their allowable levy, like what would be allowed in here, is that debt service cushion.
Go to the next one. So this is just info on the expenditure restraint program, which as mentioned, we get about $80,000 per year for that. We have to keep our budget basically under CPI, the change in our budget, and then we're able to get that payment from the state.
We were actually pretty smart when we first got our payment. We weren't sure we were able to keep it. So what we did was split it between the general fund and the capital equipment fund. What that means for us in the future is if we were to go for this pass a referendum and lose our expenditure restraint, we'd only have to find the $45,000 to plug our general fund hole. Or 40,000, whatever it is in there.
That's smart.
Can go to the next one. I think this one was just showing the budget. It's just the top section of that budget public hearing. So this is like a detailed view of the general fund that shows all of your revenues and expenditures. I don't think there's anything to add on
I
that
don't think
one.
there was.
You can go to the next one. This one's in here for fun. This is what goes into the expenditure restraint calculation to determine if we qualify. So we get to put all of our information into this worksheet. I think we just did that this month, last month.
Yes, we did.
To claim for next year. So you fill it out based on the, like, for this year, it was the 2022 budget that it's filled out for, and then that determines if you get a payment in 2023. So this one was for the 2021 budget, determining if we get the 2022 payment, which we did.
It's really a broken program. A lot of municipalities get a ton of more money than what we get in that program, but they compare your budget. They don't even look at your actual. So they look at your 2021 budget and your 2022 budget, not even taken into consideration. So say you got this really large revenue and you wanted to spend it in the general fund, that would be a CARES grant. We got, say, $200,000 for CARES. The smartest thing we did was kick it out to a special revenue fund, and then we kicked out all the expenditures, because if you were to keep it in the general fund and you would have amended your budget for an additional $200,000 worth of revenue and expenditures, you would have got kicked out of the program. Because the state doesn't take into consideration you have non-tax revenue to cover that additional $200,000 expenditure. It's kind of a silly program, but it's a program you want to qualify for.
So this is just what the actual worksheet looks like. I think all of these slides like tie together for the total budget. You adjust it, and then that's kind of what drops into these. So this was just kind of background to see how that all flows together. So this one is one where things get confused a lot, where you have your assessed value, your equalized value, and your appraised value. So the assessed value is basically the value that our assessor, hey, that's actually helpful, thank you. I was gonna wing it. Assessed value is the value that our assessor puts on a property. So we're actually going for a reassessment here, I think next year.
Next 3 years.
Yeah, to kind of get that in line. So basically you have so much value in your community, and that's what your tax levy gets distributed among. And then based on that, that's how your tax rate changes. So like a reassessment does not say your tax rate's necessarily going to go up. If everyone was under assessed and they all go up, nothing's going to change. It's just your assessment more accurately reflects.
So the reason why we're going for a reassessment is because our assessment ratio was below 1. It's been below 1 for too long. We're at like 0.86.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're so much below the 1, the state's gonna require you, I think in 5 years, to go through a reassessment. So they would mandate it, like get an assessor for you. But we have worked with our assessor, and the state knows we're doing this. So as long as we're in the process, we're good.
We're just getting ahead of it.
Well, we're not gonna allow the state to mandate it. We're just gonna do it.
Yeah, I think we're at like our 5 years this year.
I think this is our 5th year.
Yeah, so that'll be going on.
That's typical.
Yeah. So yeah, the assessed, oh, thank you. That's fine. We'll switch to equalized. So that's the value of your property given by the state. Like on your tax bill, you'll see like a market value, and that's kind of your equalized. But the equalized is like a general thing. They take the whole area and like mark it up to market value. There's a really fun publication if you guys would like to see that for how the state comes up with that. But the equalized tax rate is what's used by the other taxing jurisdictions. So like the way the school district and NTC and Marathon County determine how much to allocate to each of the communities, they actually use that equalized value.
That's when, a perfect example, it wasn't that long ago that this, I know that people at the school district said, hey, your taxes are going down.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at Jen and I said, what is he talking about? I mean, because you're not gonna see a tax decrease on your tax bill, because your tax bill is based on the assessed values. So just because the equalized value for the village of Weston went up, say 5%, our assessed value didn't go up 5%. So your equalized rate dropped, but your assessed rate went up. So that's just something when you're talking to people about your tax rate, make sure you're on the same page. If you talk with someone from the school district or the county or the technical college, their tax rate is gonna be the equalized tax rate. But that tax rate's not showing up on your tax bill. That's your equalized rate, your assessed tax rate, sorry. So,
And that's where the assessment ratio comes in. So you take your assessed value divided by your equalized value, and that gets you your assessment ratio. If you wanted to do it off your tax bill, you would look at that assessed value, and then the estimated fair market value is the equalized. And then that comes out to that assessment ratio. So like there, that was 2020s and it was 0.86. Maybe we're lower now. It might be like 0.83.
it is lower now.
Yeah,
So that's where, when you look at your tax bill, I don't like the state has not changed the terminology. They use market rate. Well, we all know, then people think that's what they can put on the for sale, with a realtor, but the realtor has their own market rate.
yeah, so the equalized is really just the states coming into an area and saying, oh, everything has gone up in like this much value, and they, assign a value to the entire area, and then it kind of gets worked out where you get assigned one for your property, but that's not necessarily the value of your property. So then you have your appraised, which the village has nothing to do with. You would actually go out and, get an appraiser for that. So neither your market value or your assessed value that you see on your tax bill are the value of your property. They're purely just things used in calculating taxes. Yeah. You can go to the next one. Just trying to remember. Okay, so do you have things to add on this one?
No, I don't.
Okay. Looking at revenues, should have looked at this beforehand. I apologize. Trying to remember what we're showing.
That's just your general fund source revenues by source, the trend. It just goes to show that the large blue thing on the bottom is your general property taxes. I think the green that's shrinking from left to right, that's our state revenue.
Yeah, that's intergovernment. I think that was the point of this, is showing like taxes, we've become more reliant on taxes and everything else has kind of shrank from 2014 to 2021. That works. You can go to the next one. So this was done a while ago, just comparing you hear a lot of times comparing like, oh, the village versus another community. But each community provides different services and has different like allowable levies. So it's really hard to have those comparisons. So we have a similar population to the city of Baraboo. Baraboo's 12,000, we're about 15,000. And Baraboo has tax revenue of 7.5 million in their general fund, whereas the village had 4.9 million. And that's just where like the tax rates are sitting, and then the levy limits kicked in, and so we have quite a low like tax rate for everything that we are providing. And then looking at Baraboo's intergovernmental, they also went out there where they're getting the 3.2 million and we're getting like 1.7 million, even though we're very like similarly sized communities.
It just goes to show, like, if you're gonna compare the services that Baraboo offers compared to the services at the Village of Weston, we're completely different. We can't even compete with them because we don't have the money. And we can't even get to where they're at. Like, we can't generate that much tax levy unless we go to a referendum and ask our taxpayers for a $5 increase in the rate. I don't think it's happening. But just, yeah. Okay, next.
So this is just the,
We can
budget
email you
hearings.
this copy of
Yeah.
this. I know it's hard to see, but on our computer, it looks really nice.
Yeah, that's just showing just the difference in the taxes. You can look at both of the publications. And then same with this was a publication of a bunch of communities that gets published. Why can't I think of the name of this?
Taxpayer lines.
Maybe. But anyway, that just shows all of the shared revenue and equalized value and then local tax rate and local levy among all these communities that are very similar in size.
I think we're way on the bottom, aren't we, with the blue?
Yes.
Okay, next
So,
one,
I think that's it.
that's it. Okay, that was long, that's fine.
Need a motion to approve that presentation?
Nope, no motions. Moving on. Number 8.
A second?
I think it was good too.
No, we better
It was
do
Dan's in a
this.
second.
Okay,
Oh.
perfect.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, Jim.
Do I still go any more in discussion?
Thank goodness they know what they're talking about.
Well, we're
Did we have a legitimate motion or was that a joking motion?
I'm not sure either. I'm not sure if I carry.
I think we're gonna go with.
talk about, this is we didn't need to acknowledge or do anything for the presentation. If you just have more questions, feel free to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. That was a lot of information, but we can narrow it down if you have particular interest.
It
Do you want,
does
like,
say approve or not approve, so. Your call.
Well, did anybody have any other questions?
Are you on, which one are you on now?
We're still at 7.
Which is the presentation?
Yes.
Oh, fine.
I think probably the biggest thing to take away from that is from the second to last slide that you had, comparatively speaking to other municipalities of about the same size, our tax rates are actually pretty low. Provided the services that we, as the village, give out.
Yeah. And just in general, like the governmental finances, it's complicated. If you want like the short version, it's complicated. Like people like to say, oh, yeah, your taxes are high, but they don't understand like what all goes into that or, you know, what's being provided and actually looking comparatively and seeing. And it's like they're not when you actually look.
And actually, one of the first meetings I had with Jessica, I asked her that. I said comparatively, how do we rank amongst other villages who provide about the same services, same size population, but she's very quick to inform me of all the variables that go into what money you get from the state and how you get that money and everything else that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a black and white response really, but.
Well, you'll hear like different municipalities, their threshold of, what do you call that? Lien is different from our threshold of lien.
yeah.
Like, we've been lien since 2010. They were so proud when they held our tax rate to $5.10 in 2010, 11, 12, which really hurt us.
I'm sorry, Jessica. I know you have I got a hard time hearing you. I know your voice is so quiet.
I'm sorry.
I know you have a,
Going too.
huh?
And it's going.
I see that.
What I was trying to say is when different communities have a pain point, like they're operating lean and we're operating lean, but everyone's definition of lean is very different.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay, say
If you don't
hi.
have any, I'm sorry.
Any more discussion? No remarks? Say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passed. Let's see, number 8, discussion and possible recommendations on procurement policy to purchases with grant funds.
So this is a policy that we had last time that Dave was here for, but we're bringing it back. Lauren had a couple of changes, grammatical changes. So this is a policy we would like to have in place only for grant purchases. we would like to come back with another policy for all other non-grant purchases. We'd like it more detailed and refined, but for grant purchases, this kind of follows the federal guidelines that we need to follow. Is there any recommendations that we have?
The question I have is, Mr. White, we're only grammatical ones, or, okay. Can I make a motion? I can't find it, I lost it.
So I'm sorry, I've got a question. So
Sorry, I'll wait.
the motion to
There.
approve the procurement policy is based off of the Baker Tilly's updates for grammatical changes?
No, Mr. White, so Lauren had grammatical changes.
Okay, gotcha.
This was updated with some recommendations for Baker Tilly. It wasn't, they didn't have too many. They had a couple that we had to tweak to make it follow the federal policy, but there were not too many significant changes.
That's, I guess, where I got confused, because we had them review it for our ARPA fundings.
Yes.
So I'll make a recommendation, recommend the board to approval of the grant procurement policy.
Second?
Motion by Gao, second by Hardinger. Motion's been approved. Any more in discussion?
Or is that the staff recommend this?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you gotta vote on it first.
Oh, I don't know how to do that.
All in favor?
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Item number 9, discussion and possible recommendations on ARPA funds.
Okay, so at our last committee meeting, the committee wanted us to bring back the tax impact if we were to reduce our borrowing. And so we have a couple scenarios in the packet. So this is you can't see it, but this is the page that Greg Johnson prepared for us. If we were to continue with our proposed CIP plan, these would be the rate increases that we would see moving forward if we were to not change any of the dollar amounts that were being suggested in our CIP plan.
So this would be no changes whatsoever.
Yeah, this is as proposed. This was prepared, Greg submitted this to us last year. So
Earlier this year.
but it was before any rate increases. So this is just a sample of where we were at. We didn't have an update for current rate increases, which have happened. So I guess the main column I'm having a look at is the total tax rate for debt service.
What is that?
Okay, should we move on?
Cursor's on it? Thank you. Appreciate that.
So if I'm not mistaken, so this is based on, we were estimating spending approximately $3 million annually for general fund capital improvements in addition to the building project.
I think that's what it was at.
And that was for a 5-year period. So as we move forward, there'd be potentially additional borrowing that may be considered. But this was based on a 5-year look at whatever year this was done.
So what I prepared was what the tax rate impact would be if we were to reduce our debt, the amount of debt taken out by, I think it was 2 million, 1.5 million, and 500,000. So,
This is 2 million.
yes.
Sorry, I got all mine.
So if we were to not borrow, say, $2 million, the annual save for a $200,000 house, go down just a little bit so I can read that, would be approximately $40. So over a 10-year period with a person that owns a house with assessed value of $200,000, they'd save approximately $396 in those 10 years if we were to not borrow the $2 million and use our ARPA fund. I know in reality we can't use the full two, but it was just a scenario that
Right.
we put the 2, 1.5, and then 5 in there.
You go to the next one?
This is a 1.5.
Hmm.
And then just a $500,000. So with our borrowing, it's each year that they would see a savings. Because we borrow for 10 years. The annual savings is only $9.80, but over the 10 years, they get $98 savings.
Oh, sorry. Got it. 98.
I guess the logic, because Wolf, I don't think any of us really were here when we were talking on this.
I remember.
And what we talked about was if we use the funds that we got from the federal government and bought, say, a truck instead of borrowing for that truck, that in itself would save for the fund, because we do a, 10-year, 5-year on the trucks?
The truck is probably in a 10-year.
Okay, and so that would be a savings for 10 years there. If we continue to buy equipment instead of borrowing for it with the funds, it actually, in the end, is going to help lower our tax rate. That, I guess, is a simpler way of just putting it, that it's, we're going to use these funds to buy CIP, which is a one-time funding. We don't want to do operations. We just talked about the CIP so that, like I said, it would keep snowballing because we wouldn't be adding on to it each year.
Yeah, I think that, if I'm not mistaken, was a recommendation to use that for the capital improvement projects, so that we're not levying
Right.
against or borrowing.
Right, and in the end, it, like I said, it will help the tax rate.
And again, the total amount we work with, so much goes, will be some set aside already for safer or?
Yeah, Safer and Everest Metro is each get
Yeah.
$220,000.
And if we use 1.5, what's the remainder then?
I think there'd be like 200,000 left. I think we had like 1.8 basically after the Safer and EMPD
Yeah.
was remaining. So yeah, if you do 1.5, you'd have like 300,000.
But then I think I heard staff said that they still may have other ideas or recommendations that want us to consider before we take a look at the 1.5 or the 5 or 1 million. Correct to say that, Keith?
We had some other thoughts on where we could consider spending. I know we had there were some things we were kind of throwing up against the wall, I suppose, with maybe some organizational planning studies or things of that nature.
I should like
Planning.
I'd like to see those from a staff standpoint. I would, before, say $500,000 or 1.5. I know we can't do the 2. But I think it'd be nice from, we have staff, we have a lot of things in your mind. I think you should share them with us. That's my opinion before we kind of, go be the next meeting. I don't think you make any recommendation now, but I think that information would be helpful. For me, it would be.
I also wanna, Dave emailed, what can we not spend these funds on? We can't pay debt with it, and we cannot use it for pensions. The final rule basically freed up the money for almost anything else.
Saw that. Mhm.
So
It was limited at first, very much.
it was very limited at first, but with the final rule, there is not much. They allow governments to spend up to $10 million on quote unquote governmental services. So any of your normal operating expenses.
I guess a good, sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
No, I was just gonna ask if, from Michael's perspective, fleet status.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, graders, plow trucks, those things in the CIP. I mean, those things are 200,000, generally to starting, somewhere between $200,000, $250,000 a piece, so. Whether it's that or, some of our street repaving projects, I think those would fit in that kind of same, criteria. Instead of borrowing $250,000, $300,000 for, a section of roadway, we could, just utilize those funds, still do the same projects in the CIP, but, essentially we're using cash instead of, our credit card for it, so.
Well, and as far as like a roadway or something like that goes, 2 million or 1.5 million isn't gonna build much of a road, but it could pay for a couple of vehicles that we need.
Yeah, I mean, like a repaving project, you could probably get a half mile out of,
Yeah.
$300,000, which, it isn't bad
Yeah, I guess.
realistically. We're looking at Northwestern. What does that end up being? I think it's a little over a mile. And I think I got that like 600,000, for a total cost, so.
Oh, that's better than I thought.
Yeah, so as long as asphalt and other prices don't keep climbing, we can get a a fairly good repaving project, taken care of too. So I don't think we need to decide whether it's trucks or repaving, but that general philosophy is just there, we can see how that works.
So you're saying for roughly a half mile road would cost roughly?
About 300,000. I usually figure about 150 a quarter mile.
That's better than I thought, yeah.
That's just repaving like a.
That's just repaving.
I'm not talking about making a new road, just repaving.
Yeah, you're removing the existing asphalt, putting down new pavement. And that'll vary too based on road widths and how many
Right,
lanes.
yeah, how many lanes in turn, yeah. Was there, I'm sorry, was a recommendation from the departments, Keith in here, or as far as what their thoughts on?
We had, I think, shared some ideas in the past. I think maybe we need to follow up then after this discussion that philosophically, it seems you want to use this money for capital projects, is what I'm hearing.
That's one of my, that was my first one. And no matter where we put it back into, for general obligation, it's gonna cover whatever they have in a capital plan. It could be a vehicle, it could be a road, whatever. The question then is though, when we put that back in, I know you showed me what it would do for a resident. And if we don't use the same CIP plan and we go through I'd like to know what years that would help us in our tax rate, and when we would see that, what type of reduction in the tax rate we'd see, because I know because we got the facility, the new facility come on board, we're gonna have a bump in our payback and our taxes. I kind of want to know.
Oh, so those documents actually show that.
Okay,
If you go down,
the bottom?
Yeah, the highest rate is in 2027. The tax rate for debt goes up to $2.33.
Okay,
go down.
I think,
So this is
oh, you
their
wanted this
tax
one.
rate yearly would go down, it would be 17 cents lower, say next year, and then 18 cents a reduction in 2020. So that is the tax rate for that year.
Oh, so I have to jump back to the other chart and subtract them from your chart then, just hypothetically. You do that for
Sorry,
next
I
time?
can do that for next time.
Okay. I just like to see it together.
Okay,
I know it's hypothetically, we should put that in earlier, but it's a hypothetical. It gives me an idea what that does to our tax rate.
I feel kind of misleading though. So yeah, remember that, like, when I asked Greg before, the interest rates were like 0.8 through 2.
Oh, okay.
Currently, I asked him again, and they went all the way up to 3.5. I think they started at 2 to 3.5 to give you an idea of what the interest rates are doing on our general obligation
think-
debts.
I think you ought to have that. Can you do that with the chart with the new interest rates or not? Yeah, we should, because then we're looking at.
I'll try. These are Greg's spreadsheets.
I know.
But I'll see what I can put together.
You see what I'm trying to look for?
Yeah.
And I know it's not, it's voodoo science as far as I'm concerned, basically.
It'll be just an idea, yeah.
Mark, do you have a
I
comment?
just have a quick question. Apologize for being late.
I didn't even see
You
one.
said no debt payment, right? No.
We cannot use it for debt, so that's why we're looking at a CIP so we don't borrow.
Okay, because I'm getting a lot of attention on that. I think I've shared some stuff with Keith on that too. So that's actually good to know, but you know why? I mean, it's kind of like giving somebody, a couple $1,000 and they can't pay their house down. They have to go buy something. I mean, it's just a little odd, but most of this is all odd.
I think it was to stimulate.
Yeah, stimulate what?
Yeah.
So anyway, with that being said, but it's a done deal, no debt, right?
We cannot use it to pay debt.
Period.
Or
Good.
pension.
I'm just gonna have that in my back pocket.
Okay.
And then the other thing that we talked about at board, just so you know, is that we would like to have the money affect everybody. Okay, so if you're gonna do a project, like a park would affect everybody. They could essentially all use it, or a road, or a vehicle. But I think for a while we were talking about water, some kind of a water project. And I know the past board, Steve Minell was on, and he said, well, I'm not on water.
Or mine.
So where's, who, or even Barb, so where's my benefit? So I think those are just the broad strokes that maybe we should think about.
Now, when we're looking at the capital improvement program, but you
That's
describe
everybody.
it, CIP. Does that include the water and sewer? Yes, it does.
Yes,
I remember that now. Yes, it does.
but what we can do in it, we can reduce the amount that the general
Yep,
obligation
Yep.
tax would cover.
yeah, I understand. I was just trying to follow up on Mark. I remember you saying it did include it in that one.
It does, yes. It's a street project which would encompass all the funds.
Maybe to follow up on your question, Mark.
Yeah.
So if we have a project, for instance, some additional expenditures or additional capital improvements we want to do at this public safety building, for one example. We have not borrowed that money at this point.
Yeah, that would be reducing that.
So that would, if it is,
No.
we can pay for a new project, we can't pay for a project we already have borrowed the funds for.
Right.
That's
I'm
the
sorry.
distinction,
Yes.
okay?
But by saying yes to the safety building, we're just backing up CIP. That was
Well,
my
the safety
understanding.
buildings in the CIP.
Yeah, but we would just back up another project,
Right, it's a matter of what our,
Yeah.
what we want to spend it on.
But you're right, we could do it with that, yeah.
Are we,
That was a good question, thank you. So, sorry.
no, go ahead.
So, because we had it on the 6 o'clock board meeting, I think to address this as well. So is this something we're just gonna table until we can have a better idea of where we're gonna spend the money?
That's,
I'd bring it up on the board, yeah, I think we're not gonna table, we can just end the discussion, it's gonna be a reoccurring item on our agenda at Finance Committee, and just like it is on the board.
There's no action on this at this point.
We put it on just so we talk about it every month.
And you can,
It's kind of like burning a hole.
Have a recommendation.
and basically, some of my comments, I think, will be forwarded to the board. A couple, 4 are here already, so.
Yeah.
I think it's still not done yet. We're not, soup isn't done. I think it's just discussion that's gonna go into, you finally want to see where you put everything.
I'd also like to add to that too is, I know we earmarked 10% for Safer and 10% for Irish Metro. I'd like to know what their intentions are with that money too.
I thought they already have that.
approved paying bonuses, it's gonna be about $70,000, not including WRS and taxes.
Bonuses?
They get $1 for each hour that they worked during 2020, I think,
Oh, going back to 2020?
yes.
So they're back paying them for time that they couldn't pay them for out of their budget now?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't do it on payroll, right? You can't increase payroll with ARPA funds.
I think you could.
You can do bonuses, you can't do payroll, like weekly, right? Am I,
That's not true.
oh, it's not true? Okay.
Well, it's not advised to spend ARPA funds on regular operations.
Right,
Because
okay.
that's what regular payroll would be is,
Yep.
but, the bonuses that were recommended would be a one-time bonus.
Right, one time only.
And that's common in that departments, right?
That's what?
That bonuses are common in those two entities, right?
I believe so.
I'm not there. I just understand. I think that's right.
All right. Yeah, My only thought on that is, I know we're looking at their budgets over there. I'd just be concerned it would set a precedent outside of their existing budget. Not that they don't deserve to get the money. But it's not, I don't, you know, if something that they're looking to have happen again in 2 years, a year.
Mark, you sit on that, don't you?
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying, isn't bonuses annually kind of consideration for that group?
Is it what?
It's on an annual basis, they see bonuses, right?
No.
Oh, I didn't know. I'm trying to figure which
It's
one.
one time only.
Okay.
The last time I knew a bonus was paid, was when, how do I wanna say this, our outgoing chief. And, during the event, we paid a bonus, the board of directors paid a bonus to the deputy and one of the battalion chiefs for handling, that 6 months to a year event when there was no chief there. But he was still important. And we're through that now.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
So it wasn't asked for, the board, the SAFER board decided to do it. It was, I believe it was $5,000 deputy and $2,500 to the battalion chief. The deputy, if you guys don't talk, I'm gonna keep talking. So the deputy was the acting interim chief. And then also the whole year that he had been working already and some more months, he had not been given a raise by the then chief. So he was backwards on that too.
Oh, okay.
I just have something to add quick. I think with like at finance and just in general with the board too, what we're trying to get at with the discussion on the ARPA funds is not necessarily saying this is what we want to spend it on right now, but here's kind of how we want to make the allocations so that decisions can be made for like funding. So like eventually getting to here's how much, we want towards like reducing or cash funding the capital improvement plan. And like, here's how much, we want to see funding, like the strategic plan or other, needs. Just kind of figuring out how you kind of spread that like benefit around generally. And then as the projects would be approved, I think the intention is they'd be brought back for actual approval, like, hey, now we want to use ARPA funds for this, but just kind of getting the general.
You're saying you're doing a financial plan, not saying you're actually gonna implement it in that process.
Yeah, I think the goal is kind of, okay, we have these, how do we figure out how the guidelines for spending these?
But the board has the final decision how they end up.
They do, so then eventually everything, would be brought to the board, but I don't know if that helps.
I know what you're doing. You're doing general discussion on it and basically we get input on it. But then when the time happens, there may be different issues that may cause it to be spent the way it wants to be spent. And that's the board's final decision.
Mm-hmm.
Do we already have the money?
We had the first portion since last year and the second portion, I think we're getting next month.
Yeah, I
In June.
requested it last week. I submitted a request for it.
Well, it sounds like we owe some people from Safer and Everest Metro some back pay. I know it's not the discussion we're having right now, but I understand that there's some items we could probably bring to the board from 2020,
Well,
if that's what,
yeah, the bonus, let's see. The SAFER board had never talked about the bonuses.
Actually, it was at the meeting you weren't there.
Yes, it was the last one. Yep, and then it was brought up. I saw it on the agenda, but I was not able to make it.
Yeah.
And, I had talked to the chief about it because he wanted to just see what I thought. And, we've had a really big issue on SAFER for just keeping people there. The turnover is huge. But the NPD, there's nobody owed any money.
okay.
There's nothing at all owed there, so. And I've heard Clay talk a little bit about it, unless he's talked more to you, Jessica, or Jenna, or Keith. I know he talks.
He hasn't recently.
No? Okay. I think he's still kind of up in here on that. I
He
think-
wants a car for Sully, I think that was the name.
For who?
For Sully, the therapy dog.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I heard that.
He's waiting on that. Well, he's kind of waiting on us. We have this procurement policy that the finance committee just approved tonight. So we will be sharing that policy with both Evers Metro and Safer so they can move forward with spending their funds because we're kind of holding them back because we need them to follow the correct policy also.
I agree.
Yeah, and that was my question. If there's something our first responders need and could use, the rest of it, if we're divvying it up for capital improvement, or we need to talk to department heads about what they need urgently, or if there's something we could add to our current projects that would cut back on the levies, that's something that could take a little bit of time. But if our cops need vests, if they need a new car, and we have earmarked money for it already, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time waiting on that, if we already have the money. That's my thoughts.
I agree. So,
So I don't know what we have to do for a decision on this, if we're just leaving it,
Yeah, I see it. I saw it, just no action.
no action. Do we need a motion for that, or just leave it?
Sorry.
Number 10, do I just go through 10 through 14 then? Number 10, next meeting dates Monday, June 20th, 2022 at 4:30. Number 11, topics for future meetings, vendor addition, procedure checklist, direct payments, policy review. Number 12, remarks from staff.
I got nothing else to add. I'll let you know how our next meeting date will go. I don't know if we'll have a new person here. I'm hoping so, because I'm gonna be struggling just to try to keep up with daily activities of finance, especially month end. So we got 3 candidates for the position. Hopefully we can start interviewing soon and get them aboard.
How long does our hiring process usually take?
It depends on the position. Some of I've done a lot of the recent hiring with the Public Works Department. If we see a good candidate right away, we bring them in, interview them, and sometimes it's, within a week or two. Other times you're waiting for the right fit. So I guess it's really staff dependent, I guess. The department directors generally are the ones reviewing the applications, looking at it, so we don't have an HR department that ciphers through everything or waits a certain, 3 weeks or whatever from the time the advertisement goes out. As applications come in, you can see them and, nab a good candidate right away and get them in. So,
Thank you, Michael.
The problem with this one is we'll never be able to replace her.
yeah, thanks a lot, John.
So, it's the truth.
I'm sure you'll find
I
somebody.
hope there's one hell of a party, but she's a dynamo. She is.
So Jessica, are you interviewing, you said there's 3 candidates, or?
Yes, I have 3, I'd say they're all pretty well qualified candidates, so we're excited to, hopefully this week to bring them in or early next week.
Well, Jen is out here at the end of the month, right?
Any other remarks from committee members? Announcements? And adjournment of financial committee.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Give a second?
Second, second, Jim Lynn. Are you ready?